Welcome to tonight's edition of Live with Red and NYC. I am Carly Iacono, First Vice President Investments for Marcus & Millichap. And tonight I have with me Marcos Drummond, who is the Senior Sales Director for Vic Properties, a large-scale residential developer in Portugal. Welcome, Marcos. So nice to connect with you today.
Thank you, Carly. Thank you for inviting us and having us on this conversation and this mutual reflection that we'll do around the theme.
Absolutely. Before we get started, I need to do a quick rundown of tonight's sponsors and thank everyone who makes events like this possible. Without these sorts of companies, we would not be able to connect people like Marcos from halfway around the world to share interesting perspectives. So thank you to CNA Seneca Construction, Skyline Scaffolding, DNA Construction Advisors, Champion Elevator, Remax 100, City Bay Capital, Property Shark, Hydrocheck Environmental, NYREM, Real Estate Promos, Clean to Clean, and Eco Safety Consultants. I think we got everyone. So now let's jump in. Particularly excited about this connection because I think it's so common for us as investors and real estate related entities in the industry to kind of get in our bubble, to see one lane and not really think of different perspectives. So having a developer from another country in a different product line than some of us are in, I think is a really useful connection to make in today's changing world. So Marcos, again, thank you for being here. We look forward to hearing kind of what you're experiencing in Portugal and how things have been for you during COVID and post-COVID. Before you jump in, why don't you give us a quick background on Vic Properties and your role there?
Okay, so Vic Properties is what you call in the US a developer. We operate, I don't know how common this is in the US, in Europe it's pretty rare. We do operate across the whole of the value chain of real estate. So from the sourcing of the plots all the way to the after sales and everything in between. And we have those capabilities in-house, although of course we have partners throughout. This means that we do have the capabilities to take on something which is quite rare in Portugal, which is large scale schemes and developments. What we call, so instead of buildings, we do neighborhoods. And because we do neighborhoods, we have to, and we have a quite sizable pipeline in terms of volume, we do have to think more holistically about how people will live there. So we have to think not just about the residential offering, but also the whole ecosystem in terms of retail, how it works with infrastructure, see also a little bit how the city is planning to grow over the next couple of decades and kind of dovetail all of that into our own projects. I myself had sales, so I had the sales team. I managed what we would call the distribution channels, partnerships, etc. And basically, you know, from I go from the sales and the storytelling to the revenuing, let's put it that way, which means that looking at our runway, I'm also a little bit in charge on the future market appeal and the saleability of the future projects that we're going to have. So I have to keep an eye on where things are going and how we're going to be the first ones to get there.
Interesting. Thank you. And I want to dive into your investment strategy a little bit deeper and kind of how you make a project come together. But before we go into that, why don't you give us a quick overview of where you are in terms of COVID in Portugal? Because our perspective here in the US is probably a bit different. The highly politicized virus, lots of shutdowns, state by state, it's completely different. So what has the response been in Portugal, and where are you in the overall pandemic in terms of shutdowns and so forth?
Okay, so let me backtrack to February, right? It's in the news, but it's somewhere else. Nobody's really worried. We had the first case in the country on March the 1st. And from then it was a little chaotic. There was a lot of, let's say that the quality of the information was poor and people got quite scared quite fast. Nobody really knew. There was all this memes going around that was, a rampage, and that it would destroy your innards in a couple of hours. All these things, and this was in early March. So what happened was, as we got the first cases, it was actually civil society and people themselves who started staying at home. So it was the population that led the reaction to COVID, and the government followed. Put it this way. So people started staying at home before there was a state of emergency declared.
And did that include schools and businesses, or just individuals on a case-by-case basis, or was it pretty widespread?
Schools and businesses.
Okay.
So before schools closed, I had the first few members of my team saying that they weren't comfortable going to work, and nobody really knew what was going on. So there was let's say the level of precaution was really high. There was a little bit of an overreaction based on that low quality of information that we mentioned. Then the information started coming in, the weeks started passing, and the cases, of course, grew. They were never very serious, and actually at that stage, Portugal did very well compared to the countries around it and the ones that compare to it, namely Italy and Spain, which were the most serious cases here in Europe. We were lucky that it hit them first, to be honest, because that gave that window. So, oh, it's coming. Let's take care. Then what we saw, that we were, let's say, a month and a half behind Asia, right? And for example, and then something really interesting happened, which was, as we were going into it, Asia was coming out. And for example, our associates and people that we work with in Asia were saying, yeah, it's going to last a couple of months, and then everybody's going to start coming back out. And it's going to be, a lot of social distancing, a lot of mask wearing, a lot of gel and hand sanitizer, and just good old water and soap. But you're going to have to find the next normal, because everyone staying in is just not sustainable and it's not healthy in a different sense. And so it was.
So is everything open back up? Where does that put us today? Let's kind of fast forward, because I want to make sure
2 months later,
yes,
2 months later, mid-May, things started opening back up. Activity started resuming. Some people went back to the offices. Some are still working from home. Restaurants started gradually opening. Barbershops, hotels, etc. The only thing that was not back to semi-normal was that there were some travel restrictions on people coming in from different destinations, which were at their own stage of handling the pandemic. The US is certainly one of those cases. I have family in New York who was supposed to come on holidays with me last week, and they didn't, because they're not allowed to travel. So it depends a little bit on where the incoming, for example, tourisms or business travelers are coming from. That is and even that is gradually back to normal. Of course, the business volume pretty much across the board was affected, but all things considered, we did quite well, and on a relative terms, we We even gained some prominence, and for a few reasons, actually. Because Portugal did well, especially in that first stage of the reaction to the pandemic, Lisbon was nominated, or let's say named by Knight Frank as one of the 4 cities whose real estate values will grow over the next year. And there were 4 of them. So it was us, Sydney, Shanghai, and I don't remember the 4th, but we were in there, in that group of 4. And we were also, Portugal on a whole was nominated by Forbes as the top country to go and live after COVID, if such thing will exist. I would say right now there's a high probability that there's no such thing as after COVID, the same way that there's no such thing as after flu. You know, there's COVID and there's us, and we have to find a new way to keep on living.
Yeah. So how did all of this turmoil, and it sounds like maybe potential upside, change or alter your overall development or investment strategy as a company?
Okay. So, for example, just to give you a few ideas, right? So, for example, we have a couple of projects which are urban in nature, but they're right on the riverfront. So, for example, the way we are planning the product coming to market over the next few years has changed a little bit. There's a little bit of more focus on the indoor-outdoor living, because that certainly became a hot issue. If people are going to be spending more time at home, there's a bit of not a trend, I would call it a force shaping, which is called cocooning. So the people are paying more attention to where they live. Let's put it this way, and they're paying more attention. They're putting more resources into it. They're looking for places where they're going to spend more time, and they're allocating more of their budget to it, not just to the real estate itself, but also, you know, decoration, the technology, connectivity at home, etc. There's also a segment of the population which is looking at spending less time in the city and more time in second homes, away from the city. In Portugal, this is very easy because you can drive from top to bottom of the country in about 6 hours. It's not a very big country, so so it's very easy to have let's say a more isolated living experience, or even integrated into the infrastructure 1-2 hours from one of the main airports, and do everything you need to do in an urban setting 1 hour away. Just drive there, and then you're back in for example, a bigger house with a garden, or next to the beach, or etc.
When you're doing your apartment, or we call multifamily developments here in the US, are you seeing less demand for shared amenities and more for single family homes in maybe a community, but less overlap with other people? Or is just the overall demand for amenities up related to housing?
That's an interesting question. We haven't noticed a significant shift in terms of the appeal of the amenities. We have noticed people wanting bigger terraces, people valuing something that we already had. So it was good that we had it, because now it's more of a competitive advantage for us, which is the proximity of parks, the proximity of the riverfront, and just living somewhere where you can see the horizon. And we have that, and that has benefited us quite a bit since people started looking at property again since, I would say, early May.
So in the U.S., the live, work, play concept was all, the discussion pre-COVID. It's how do we densify residential areas, but add this entertainment component, which could be, a bounce house area for the kids. It could be restaurants, could be concert venues. There was a lot of really high population density sort of amenities that everyone's kind of rethinking now. But it sounds like in your appeal, it's more natural, it's more outdoor space, and maybe that's a product of the demand in Portugal or just your country being beautiful and having more outdoor space that's appealing. When you're building these communities, was that entertainment component really ever a big part of it? And if so, has that changed, or was that really nothing that was in demand in Portugal?
No, it really is a factor ever since we started looking at the plots themselves. So we were looking at places where we could create these neighborhoods that would kind of inspire a new way of living. So we were thinking of bright, airy spaces with lots of light, with lots of room to run around in, to walk around in. Because one of the things in Lisbon is very hilly. It's the second hilliest capital in Europe. It's very safe, so you can walk everywhere. So we try to have walkable spaces, cyclable spaces. There was a bit of a trend, even though we do have a ratio of, for example, of parking spaces that we need to have in our building. So if you're building X units, you need to have Y parking spaces. That ratio was coming down because there was an effort by the city. Lisbon was and is, even though right now it's not exercising it, the 2020 Green Capital of Europe. So there was a lot of different initiatives to mark that, and one of those was kind of gradually phasing out the importance of the car in the city. So there were a lot of things around shared mobility, bicycles, car sharing, all of that. So we would allocate, we thought that in the future we wouldn't need as much space in an asset as you're investing just to have cars parked there, right? But now it seems to be that in the short to medium term, personal transportation, personally owned transportation will remain a force, and you do have to cater for it. So parking spaces are back at the forefront of things people are looking for, and so on and so forth. So, for example, having a storage room at ground level where people can put bicycles in, things like that, so that they don't have to carry them into their apartments, tiny things like that. And we have always tried to bake that into our projects from the start, to kind of think how people would be living, not just inside the apartment, but how their outdoor life blends in with their indoor life and vice versa.
So it sounds like your development strategy was perfectly aligned with a post-COVID or ongoing COVID world, which is great. Really nice to hear that it has been, it almost sounds like maybe a bit more of a positive than a negative. What are you concerned about in the next 12 months from a development, or what are some of your challenges that you see on the horizon?
So short term, I would say over the next year to 18 months, I'm concerned that all of this, of course, has an economic impact, and that people kind of postpone decision making, and that they don't take big decisions on big ticket items such as homes, even though this is kind of counterbalanced by the more attention that they're paying to the home. But on the one hand, they're kind of, right now we're noticing that some people are in wait and see mode, especially now during the summer. We call this in Portugal the silly season. People are going on holidays, school hasn't started yet. So everybody's in a kind of wait and see mode. And until the economic impact of all of this is a little more clear, that is certainly something that we have to deal with, and that's that. However, in the same way that there's something I saw the other day, which was the question: who was the responsible for digital transformation in your company? Was it the CTO, the CIO? And it was none of those. It was COVID-19. COVID-19 got us talking on Zoom and broadcasting on YouTube and all of that. So it was certainly an accelerator of working from home and using these digital platforms to do things at a distance. The same way it's accelerating a few cultural, demographic, and generational trends that were coming, and that we see happening a little bit across, especially here in Europe, which is, for example, millennials coming onto the property market. That's going to happen over the next decade. You know, millennials being millennials. I'm just out of that demographic for a couple of years.
Yeah,
Millennials
me too.
Millennials. What we're noticing now is that millennials are now getting to senior roles in their career. So they have more disposable income, but they're still millennials. So they don't really have the savings to get on the property ladder. But they for example, they have high expectations of where they want to live and what they expect from the spaces. So we have a relatively good cross section of really high quality tenants coming out of the millennial generation. And we have, in our projects, there are a lot of investors buying apartments to rent out to people with these profiles, right? That millennial engineer or marketing specialist that has now reached a senior role and has high income. She doesn't have that 20 or 25% to get a loan or to get a nice equity position on the home, but they still have the disposable income to live on a nice apartment and rent it out. Over the next 10 years, this will come, and this is, I think, an unstoppable force. And unfortunately, in Italy, for example, this was a topic of conversation. These will be. We're on cue over the next 10 to 15 years to the biggest wealth transfer, generational wealth transfer of all time, because the wealthiest generation are getting, old. On average, they have the least amount of children, and this wealth, all this equity, will cascade down to this to the next generations, split in by fewer recipients, and these people who are used to living like this as tenants will have kind of instant savings, and they will have access to property, and that is going to have, in our opinion, and we have looked at this quite a bit, this is going to have a significant impact on who your customer will be in 2028 or 2029 or 2030, what they expect, and what you can kind of design and create now, so that when the time comes, you're the wave that they're going to surf.
So you feel that the demand for home ownership will significantly outpace the demand for rental because of this wealth transfer? That's the overall trend?
I do believe so, yes.
Very interesting.
I think that people will try to let's say, they will be concerned about wealth preservation, as it passes on to them. And property has always been a way to make sure that happens. And so there's a sentence by Wayne Gretzky, the ice hockey player, that I like a lot, which he said, I don't skate to where the puck has been, I skate to where it's going. And that's certainly
and if
something
you can
that
figure
we try
that
to
out,
do.
that's
Yeah,
the
exactly.
magic, right?
We try. Let's and so far
Right.
it's been
I think we all do.
going
Yeah.
well. We try to do that.
Interesting. I know this isn't your main focus, but what trends are you seeing in retail? Has curbside pickup become something here in the US that's, all the rage for every retailer to try to figure out the logistics of delivery and curbside pickup and contactless everything? Are you seeing the same thing, or is it just less of a demand thus far?
No, there's more. So the what we call click and collect has certainly been accelerated since March. And not only that, what people buy online and what they collect, you can kind of tell the story of the pandemic by what they were buying. So when the shutdown came into effect, it was computers, routers, printers, scanners, stuff like that. A few weeks later, it was like bread machines and
random,
then
right? Yeah.
a month after that, it was beard trimmers and shaving stuff and all of that. Then it was TVs. So even consumer behavior has been shifting, and one of the big impacts, because there was a period there in which like shopping malls or big retail stores, they were really closed. Was that the creation of even drive-through? You know how you have drive-through and fast food places, right? So they did that for the printers, the bread machines, and the beard trimmers and stuff like that. You would just buy it online and then collect it, because then you can beat the post office if you go there and collect it yourself.
Always. Always. That's not hard, for sure. In every country, it seems like. Do you think that behavior is here to stay? Is that just a human change in how we interact with goods across, any country? Or do you think that that's really just a temporary avoidance out of fear of being exposed to the virus?
Well, it depends on, from what we've seen here, it depends a lot. What's going to happen to retail depends a lot on what you're selling. Some stuff you can't click and collect. You can't click and collect, a haircut. Right.
So service based.
So the high street will still be occupied by your hair salons, your things that can't be shipped. That's right. Some restaurants, if you're looking for that restaurant experience, that cannot be Uber Eats compatible, and things like that. And I think that there will be an opportunity with click and collect and with these new habits shaping up. I think that there will be an opportunity because, as you know, for example, even not everything has to be a massive infrastructure warehouse outside the city where everything is shipped from. The fact that you're going to have click and collect means that you're going to have some capillarity in your distribution, which means that you're still going to have these tiny shops open to the public, or where people can just, what we call a hole in the wall outfit, that people park their car, they just go to the window and they get their stuff. But you're still going to have 15 of them or 20 of them instead of just a massive warehouse somewhere and just distribute from there. For example, we've made some changes in one of the amenities in our projects is, for example, having a drop-off point for online shopping, where you can keep, you know, if you get a delivery and you're not home, they have lockers, and there's staff there, and they can keep it for you until you arrive, and things like that. You know, office facilities, if you need to scan a big A3 document that your scanner at home isn't going to be able, or you need to bind some documents in some kind of a booklet, things like that. We have designed those, and we have been pretty quick in adjusting to have those facilities, as we realize that our customer base is going to work more from home than what they used to do, and that it's not a must-have yet, but it's a nice to have. And when people are deciding where to go, it's certainly attractive.
I know we don't have a lot more time, but I just want to get your thoughts quickly on a few other asset classes, because it's just such a unique perspective as it compares to what we're seeing here in the US. What about office demand? Are you seeing that companies are going to open back up and fully staffed? Do you think there'll be a kind of a spread into the suburbs and less urban densification in terms of office demand? Status quo? What trends do you see emerging in terms of office?
Okay, so this is something that has also affected a little bit, because as I mentioned before, we do neighborhoods, so we have to take care of everything.
Right.
We're selling the apartments, but for example, we're keeping the retail until, for example, these neighborhoods are fully consolidated so that we can curate who goes where. And we do have some office space as well, just so we can do a real neighborhood and give it the effervescence that we need. We feel it has to have to be an appealing space. In terms of offices, the main difference here is a little bit of what they're calling hot desking. So if you have,
like a rotating,
say, a workforce of 80, you may not need to have 80 workspaces. Which is funny, because it's very I feel that it's kind of short term, and it doesn't tie in very well with the sharing of space, right? That people are trying to avoid a little bit now. However, some companies are catching on that. Hey, they can make the workers pay for their own coffee and for their own workspace and their square meterage of workspace if they're working from home. So there are suddenly savings to be had there. I do believe that it's a short-term thing, and that offices will bounce back. Certainly here, because there was a shortage of office space. So there's a little bit of pressure in the market. But I would say from what we have discussed, like residential retail seems to be a little more clear there, at least for me to judge, because I'm not specialized in offices and stuff like that. But there seems to be a little bit more clarity in residential and retail than what's going to happen with the offices. One thing's for sure, people are still going to have to work together, and companies still going to have to be these structures. Everybody works with everybody else, and this has to happen in some way. And there's certainly a benefit of everybody working in an office, of everybody bouncing ideas off each other, water cooler conversation, collaboration activities. And I remember a few years ago, this was a hot topic in the US when Marissa Mayer was at Yahoo, and there were a lot of people working from home, and they gave everybody 6 months to come to organize their affairs and come back to the office, because she felt that one of the things she noticed at Google was just how much creativity happened because people were sharing a space and said, hey, what if we do this? What if we do that? Wouldn't it be cool if, oh, well, let's go in after that. And if working from home can be efficient, but and people can focus and all of that, but the creative attrition is not as good as if people are sharing an office, I believe.
I completely agree. And I've heard arguments on both sides of that here in the US, that we need more square footage to socially distance. We need less square footage because everyone's not going to return in the same capacity. That some people will maintain a work from home environment. And then we need collaborative spaces, but yet we can't get too close, but we all need to be together. So it's definitely in flux. It's really, I think, very interesting to watch for the next year, 2 years, who knows how long, to see how it plays out. I can tell you, having gone into my office with my team for the first time in months, just a few weeks ago, I went into my private office, shut the door, and basically talked through a mask, through the glass, and was like, what are we doing here? But I think finding a way to recreate that collaboration is going to be crucial. So it'll be interesting to see how we do that, for sure.
Certainly. Let's stay tuned for that.
Yeah, let's stay tuned. Exactly. So we are coming up on our time, maybe even over. I don't have it in front of me. Any closing thoughts or things that you'd like to share? And of course, we'll make sure everyone has your contact information. So I will say, if anyone's interested in learning more about investing in Portugal, or what Marcos and his team does and how they can stay connected, we'll be sure that that is put in the comments of all the videos that we send out. But anything you'd like to kind of conclude with on any of the topics that we covered?
No, well, you know, our conversation has been pretty organic and but also forward facing. So everything is a little, there are no certainties. So I would certainly be pretty interested to know also other people's opinion on these issues, and I welcome anyone to reach out to me over, you know, LinkedIn, email, if they can. Over, you know, it's just an interesting reflection. Of course, I haven't mentioned this, but US and Canada are the fastest growing market for real estate investment in Portugal. They're not the biggest chunk, like the biggest percentage, but they are the fastest growing, which is quite interesting. And it's certainly always interesting to see how people approach us differently and how they value things differently also, and certainly to explain and tell people what we're doing, and then they tell us about what they're looking for, and it also helps us let's say define next steps and what we're going to do next into the future. So that's certainly interesting, and you know, that is something that I'm always keen on doing. So I welcome any contact on those fronts.
Absolutely. I think this is a conversation we need to continue. Great to share ideas with you. Anyone watching, listening, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Marcos. We'll make sure that everyone gets connected and we keep the flow of ideas going. For today, thank you so much for being here. Really nice to meet you virtually. Appreciate all your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Carly, and I look forward to seeing you in Lisbon when possible.
Can't wait. I'll be on the next plane that they'll let us out of New York on. Sounds good. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks so much, Marcos.
Thank you. Bye-bye.